The Australian Catholic Church, or Catholic Church in Australia, is part of the worldwide Catholic Church under the spiritual and administrative leadership of the Holy See, from origins as a suppressed, mainly Irish minority in early colonial times. The Church has grown to be the largest Christian denomination in Australia, with a culturally diverse membership of around 5,439,268 people, representing about 23% of the overall population of Australia according to the 2016 census. The Church is the largest non-government provider of welfare and education services in Australia. Catholic Social Services Australia aids some 450,000 people annually, while the St. Vincent de Paul Society's 40,000 members form the largest volunteer welfare network in the country. In 2016, the Church had some 760,000 students in more than 1,700 schools. The Church in Australia has 5 provinces: Adelaide, Brisbane, Melbourne, Perth and Sydney. It has 35 dioceses, comprising geographic areas as well as the military diocese and dioceses for the Chaldean, Maronite, Melkite and Ukrainian rites. The National Assembly of Bishops is the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference, headed by Brisbane's Archbishop Mark Coleridge. There are a further 175 Catholic religious orders operating in Australia, affiliated under Catholic Religious Australia, headed by Senior Monica Kavanagh RSJ. One Australian has been recognised as a saint by the Catholic Church: Mary MacKillop, who co-founded the Sisters of St. Joseph of the Sacred Heart Religious Institute in the 19th century. Since the 1980s, Catholicism has been largest Christian denomination in Australia, constituting around 1/4 of the overall population, becoming slightly larger than the Anglican and Uniting churches combined. Up until the 2016 census, adherents had been recorded as growing both numerically and as a percentage of the population. However, the 2016 census found a fall in both overall numbers and the percentage of Catholics as a proportion of Australia, with 5,291,839 Australian Catholics in 2016 down from 5,439,257 in the 2011 census. Until the 1986 census, Australia's most populous Christian church was the Anglican Church of Australia. Since then, Catholics have outnumbered Anglicans by an increasing margin. The change is partly explained by changes in immigration patterns. Before the Second World War, the majority of immigrants to Australia came from the United Kingdom and most Catholic immigrants came from Ireland. After the war, Australia's immigration diversified and more than 6.5 million migrants arrived in the following 60 years, including more than 1 million Catholics from Italy, Malta, Lebanon, the Netherlands, Germany, Poland, Croatia and Hungary. At the 2016 census, the ancestries that Australian Catholics most identified with were English, Italian and Filipino. Despite a growing population of Catholics, weekly mass attendance has declined from an estimated 74% in the mid-50s to around 14% in 2006. There are 7 archdioceses and 32 dioceses, with an estimated 3,000 priests and 9,000 men and women in institutes of consecrated life and societies of apostolic life, including 6 dioceses which cover the whole country, 1 each for those who belong to the Chaldean, Maronite, Melkite, Syro-Malabar and Ukrainian rites, and 1 for those serving in the Australian Defence Forces. There is also a personal ordinariate for former Anglicans which has a similar status to a diocese. Since time immemorial, Indigenous people in Australia had performed the rites and rituals of the animist religions of the Dreamtime. Among the first Catholics known to have sighted Australia were the crew of a Spanish expedition of 1605-6. In 1606, the expedition's leader, Pedro Fernández de Quirós, landed in the New Hebrides, believing it to be the fabled southern continent. He named the land Australis del Espiritu Santo, Southern Land of the Holy Spirit. Later that year, his deputy Luis Vaz de Torres sailed through the Torres Strait between Australia and New Guinea. The permanent presence of Catholicism in Australia came rather with the arrival of the First Fleet of British convict ships at Sydney in 1788. 1/10 of all the convicts who came to Australia on the First Fleet were Catholic, and at least half of them were born in Ireland. A small proportion of British Marines were also Catholic. Just as the British were setting up the new colony, French Captain Jean-François de Galaup, Comte de la Pérouse arrived off Botany Bay with 2 ships. La Pérouse was 6 weeks in Port Jackson, where the French, besides other things, held Catholic masses. The crew conducted the first Catholic burial, that of Father Louis Receiver, a Franciscan friar who died while the ships were at anchor at Botany Bay. Some of the Irish convicts had been transported to Australia for political crimes or social rebellion in Ireland, so the authorities were suspicious of Catholicism for the first 3 decades of settlement. Catholics c.